Scene 1. The Boy and the Whispering Forest. Amani had always felt invisible. At 12 years old, he moved through the world quietly, like a shadow that nobody noticed. His wide, intelligent eyes were the color of dark earth, and his hair, thick and tightly coiled, often fell into his face as he studied the world around him. His clothes were worn and patched, a little too big in some places, a little too small in others, but they carried the stories of a boy who had learned to survive on his own. He had never known the warmth of a family. Amani's earliest memories were fractured. A house that smelled faintly of smoke and rain, laughter that faded too quickly, and a mother who had whispered secrets into the night before she disappeared. He remembered only flashes of a father, shadowed and angry, gone long before Amani could understand the word home. When the authorities found him alone at the edge of the town, the orphanage became his new world. A cold, gray building on the outskirts where voices barked, walls were thin, and nights stretched endlessly. Yet even in the orphanage, he was different. While other children ran and shouted, Amani observed. He noticed the faint scratches on the wooden tables, the way the wind rattled the windows before a storm, and the subtle shifts in the caretaker's moods. He learned quickly. To stay quiet was to survive, to stay invisible was to be safe. But the solitude weighed on him, heavy as the rain that often fell outside the orphanage walls. And it was during one of these rainstorms that everything changed. A thunderclap shook the orphanage, rattling windows and sending small children scurrying beneath blankets. Amani lay awake, listening when he heard it, a voice. Not loud or harsh, but soft and persistent, calling his name. Amani. He froze, his heart raced. Who could possibly know his name? The orphanage was filled with strangers, yet the voice felt urgent, intimate, and real. He pulled the thin blanket over his shoulders and strained to hear, but the voice vanished, leaving only the rhythm of rain on the roof. Then he noticed something unusual on the floor beside his bed, a small, tattered note. Hands trembling, he picked it up and unfolded it. The paper was rough, edges frayed, and the words were written in delicate, looping script. Follow the path where the fireflies dance. Fear and curiosity collided in his chest. The forest beyond the orphanage was forbidden. Tales of wild animals, thieves, and spirits had been whispered to him countless times. Yet the note stirred something he had not felt in years. Hope. Could someone know him? Could someone be reaching out, offering him a chance to be seen? Hours later, under the cover of darkness, Amani slipped out of the orphanage. His small feet barely made a sound on the wet earth, the rain-soaked grass cold beneath them. The forest loomed ahead, dense and alive, shadows twisting like fingers. He hesitated, then followed the faint flicker of fireflies, which seemed to form a path just for him. Every step into the forest was a gamble, every rustle of leaves a question. The air was thick with wet earth and the scent of moss, and somewhere far away, an owl called into the night. The fireflies moved ahead, delicate and insistent, guiding him deeper into a world he had only dreamed of, a world full of mystery, danger, and perhaps, finally, belonging. And then through the trees he saw her, a woman tall and commanding, yet with eyes that held warmth and curiosity. "Amani," she said softly, yet her voice cut through the night. "I've been waiting for you." He froze, torn between fear and relief. Could this be real? Could someone finally see him, call him by name, and know the boy he truly was? And just as his mind raced with questions, a shadow shifted in the tree line, watching silently. A chill ran down his spine, but he felt an unfamiliar thrill. For the first time in his life, he was stepping into a world where he mattered. Scene 2, the cabin and the shadows. Amani woke to the faint glow of dawn filtering through the small cabin window. The rain had stopped, leaving the forest damp and sparkling. The scent of wet earth and firewood hung thick in the air. He sat up on the narrow bed, rubbing his eyes, feeling both exhausted and strangely alert. The woman was already awake, moving quietly around the cabin, arranging bundles of herbs and papers with meticulous care. "You slept well," she said, not looking up. "You need strength for what comes next." Amani swallowed. What is this place? Who are you?" She paused, finally meeting his gaze. Her eyes were sharp, but there was a softness there too. "This cabin is a safe place. For now, it is yours as much as mine. I am someone who has been waiting for you, Amani. You are not like other children. There is potential in you, but it must be protected, nurtured." He frowned. "Potential, what do you mean?" Before she could answer, a sudden sound came from outside, a rustling, sharp and deliberate. Amani's pulse quickened. He moved to the window, pressing his small hands against the glass, and saw nothing at first. But then, in the shadow of the trees, he glimpsed a figure moving silently, watching. "Who is that?" he whispered. "Patience," she said softly. "All will be revealed in time. For now, know that some in this forest do not wish to see you safe. Others will guide you. You must learn to tell the difference." Amani's mind raced. He wanted to run to escape the unknown, but something in her presence anchored him. She handed him a small wooden cup filled with warm liquid. "Drink," she instructed. Hesitant, he took it, tasting a strange mixture of herbs and honey. It warmed him from the inside out, settling the nervous energy in his chest. After breakfast, she led him to a corner of the cabin where a small desk stood. On it were maps of the forest, jars of herbs, and stacks of old papers filled with symbols and writing he could not understand. "These are tools," she said. "They will help you survive. They will teach you to see what others cannot. But first, you must learn patience and awareness. The forest is alive, Amani. It listens, it watches, and sometimes it tests those who enter it." A soft whine drew his attention to a small crate by the door. Inside lay a few belongings, clothes, a blanket, and a small leather pouch. He opened the pouch and found a collection of objects: a tiny knife, a bundle of string, and a small stone carved with a symbol he did not recognize. He held the stone in his hand, feeling its smooth weight, a strange warmth radiating from it. "You will need these," the woman said, "but never underestimate what is watching. The shadow you glimpsed last night is not the only one." A chill ran down his spine. "Why me?" he asked. "Why now?" She turned her gaze to the window, watching the tree line. "Because the forest has chosen you, and the world will test you in ways you cannot yet imagine. But you are ready, even if you do not know it." Hours passed as she instructed him in small tasks, arranging herbs, observing patterns in the forest from the window, and practicing quiet awareness. She never raised her voice, but every instruction carried weight. The shadow outside remained, silent and patient, appearing now and then at the edge of the clearing. Amani learned to watch it without showing fear, though his heart thumped violently each time. By nightfall, the forest had grown darker, the fireflies reappearing like tiny lanterns floating above the ground. The woman led him outside to a small clearing behind the cabin. "Tonight, you will take your first lesson beyond the walls of safety," she said. "You will move silently, observe, and understand. Fear is not weakness, it is a signal. Respect it, but do not let it control you." Amani stepped forward, the cool, damp grass beneath his feet, and the shadows stretching long and strange in the moonlight. The fireflies illuminated his path, but he knew that something watched, something patient, hidden, and intelligent. As he crouched low, listening to every sound, he realized that the forest was not just a place of beauty and mystery. It was alive, aware, and dangerous. And for the first time in his life, he felt the thrill of being tested, of being challenged, of stepping into a world where he mattered, where his choices had consequences, and where courage would be the only way forward. The shadow stirred again, closer this time. Amani froze. But then he remembered the woman's words. Fear is a signal, not a prison. He held his breath, focused on the firefly's glow, and moved with care, each step deliberate, silent, and precise. Tonight was only the beginning. And somewhere, deep in the forest, something ancient and watching waited for him to prove himself. Scene 3, the first trial. The forest at night was alive in a way Amani had never experienced. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a branch, sent shivers down his spine. The fireflies floated like fragile lanterns, illuminating the twisted roots and shadows that seemed to stretch unnaturally. The woman had told him that tonight he would learn to move silently, to observe, and to trust his instincts. He felt both excitement and dread. "Stay close to the fireflies," she instructed, her voice calm yet firm. "They will guide you, but do not rely on them entirely. The forest tests those who enter it. You must notice the small things, the sounds, the movement, the smells. Everything matters." Amani nodded, though fear twisted in his chest. He crouched low, moving cautiously, feeling the cool dampness of the grass on his knees. Every sense was heightened. He heard the whisper of an owl, the faint scuttle of a small animal, and just as the woman had warned, the soft, deliberate sound of the shadow moving in the distance. Suddenly, a loud crack rang out. Amani froze, heart hammering. A branch had fallen nearby, but the shadow reacted differently. It did not retreat. It lingered, silent, watching, almost curious. Amani's breath came in shallow bursts. He remembered the small stone the woman had given him, warm in his pocket, and he gripped it tightly, as though it gave him courage. "Focus," he whispered to himself. He began to move again, slower this time, paying attention to the ground, the wind, and the faintest sounds. He noticed a thin trail of disturbed leaves, footprints too small to belong to an adult leading deeper into the forest. His curiosity flared, overriding fear. He followed, every muscle tense, aware that the shadow could strike or vanish at any moment. The trail led to a small clearing, where the moonlight revealed a circle of stones. The shadow moved closer now, and Amani could see that it was not a person but a figure draped in dark cloth, blending with the trees. Its presence was oppressive, almost unnatural. A shiver ran down his spine. "You must face it," the woman's voice came softly behind him. He hadn't realized she had followed. "Fear is not your enemy, fear is your guide. Do not run. Observe, understand, and respond." Amani steadied himself. The shadow made no move to approach. It waited like a predator judging its prey. He realized this was a test, not just of courage, but of patience, awareness, and self-control. One wrong move, and he could reveal himself to whatever lurked in the darkness. He took a deep breath and scanned the clearing. Every rustle, every flicker of movement became significant. The fireflies, glowing faintly, revealed a narrow path around the shadow. Amani followed it, each step deliberate, his body pressed low to the ground, barely breathing. The shadow did not react, but he felt its gaze, heavy and intelligent, tracking him. Suddenly, the figure shifted. It moved with startling speed, disappearing behind a tree. Amani froze, panic rising, but he remembered the woman's words. He waited. Slowly, he began to move again, staying on the path, silent as the night. By the time he returned to the cabin, dawn was breaking. His knees were scraped, and his heart still raced, but a fierce sense of pride filled him. He had faced the shadow, followed its movements, and survived. The woman met him at the door. "You did well," she said, her eyes serious but approving. "Tonight was only the beginning. There will be more tests, more shadows, and more challenges. But you learned something essential. You can face the fear, and it will not destroy you. You are stronger than you know." Amani nodded, exhausted but exhilarated. For the first time, he felt a sense of purpose. The forest was dangerous, unpredictable, and mysterious, but it was no longer just a place of fear. It was a place where he could grow, where he could learn, and where he could begin to understand who he really was. As he lay in bed that night, listening to the last rustle of the trees outside, he realized that the shadow would return. And when it did, he would be ready. Scene 4, Secrets in the Shadows. The morning sun filtered weakly through the cabin's small window, casting long, golden streaks across the wooden floor. Amani awoke to the scent of burning herbs and the faint aroma of fresh bread. The woman was already awake, moving silently around the cabin, her hands steady and sure. She did not greet him immediately. Instead, she arranged small bundles of herbs, lit candles, and checked the small stacks of papers that seemed to be maps, notes, and symbols. Amani sat on the edge of the bed, tracing the worn fibers of the blanket with his fingers, feeling a strange mixture of fear and curiosity. Last night had been his first real trial in the forest, and although he had survived, the memory of the shadow lingered in his mind. He shivered slightly as he remembered how it had watched him, patient, intelligent, and almost alive. "You slept well," she said at last, her voice calm but carrying a quiet weight. "Good. Today you will learn more than observation. You will begin to understand why you were chosen." Amani's brow furrowed. Chosen for what? The woman paused, her sharp eyes scanning his face. "For a purpose. Something that will test you, challenge you, and force you to grow. But first, you must understand the forest, its history, and what it expects of those who enter it. She handed him a small, leather-bound journal. Its pages were yellowed with age, filled with delicate handwriting and strange sketches, symbols, trees, animals, and figures moving among them. Amani opened it carefully, tracing the lines with his fingertips. Some symbols seemed familiar, as if they had been whispered to him in his dreams. Others were completely foreign, twisting his mind with their complexity. "Everything here tells a story," she explained. "This forest is alive, but it is also old. Older than the town, older than any human memory. It watches, it listens, and it tests those it finds worthy. Shadows exist here to challenge, to teach. And not all shadows are visible at first. Some hide in plain sight." Amani looked up, puzzled. "Are you saying the shadow I saw last night, it was testing me?" She nodded. "Exactly. It watches for fear, hesitation, weakness. But it also watches for courage, patience, and clarity. You survived. That is why you are here. But surviving is only the beginning." He hugged the journal to his chest, feeling both excitement and unease. "And what about you? Who are you?" The woman's eyes softened, but her gaze was still unreadable. "I am someone who knows the forest, and I know the world beyond it. I have lived long enough to see children like you arrive, scared and alone, and I have guided them to safety. But safety is not the same as understanding. You will learn both, Amani, in time." A sudden noise outside the cabin made him jump, a branch snapping, followed by the faint rustle of leaves. He peered through the window and saw nothing at first, but then movement in the shadows, a figure watching silently, patient as ever. His chest tightened. "The shadow is never far," she said quietly, as if reading his thoughts. "And neither is the truth. You must learn to see both before you can survive fully." For hours, she taught him, not with words alone, but with demonstration. She showed him how to read the forest, to notice the subtle differences in footprints, the signs of animals, the way the wind moved through the branches. She handed him the small stone he had received before, and this time instructed him to carry it outside, using it as a focus to sharpen his awareness. By midday, Amani was moving cautiously through the edge of the forest again, the stone warm in his palm. The fireflies were absent in daylight, but the shadows and shapes were more defined. He crouched low, feeling the moss beneath his fingers, noticing the tiniest movements, a bird taking flight, a rabbit slipping through underbrush. He realized how much he had missed before, how blind he had been to the forest's rhythm and patterns. And then he saw it, a small marking carved into the bark of a tree, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. It matched one of the symbols from the woman's journal. His pulse quickened. He traced it carefully with his finger, feeling a connection to something he didn't fully understand. "She's leaving clues," he whispered aloud. "She wants me to follow them." The woman's voice came softly from behind him. "The forest and I are guides, but you must choose your path, Amani. Every step you take, every decision matters. You are not a child to be sheltered. You are someone who must learn to survive, to understand, to see beyond what is obvious." Amani nodded, gripping the stone tightly. He understood now that this forest was more than trees and shadows. It was a living test, and the woman, the shadows, and even the fireflies were part of it. Every movement, every sound, every pattern carried meaning. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in streaks of orange and red, Amani returned to the cabin. He felt exhausted, but more aware, more alert, more alive than ever before. The shadow was still out there, patient, watching, but now he felt ready to meet it on his own terms. And for the first time, Amani began to realize that the forest, the woman, and the shadows were not his enemies. They were teachers, and if he could survive their lessons, he might finally uncover the truth about himself and the purpose that had brought him here. Scene 5, The Shadow Strikes. Night had fallen over the forest, draping the world in a heavy, almost suffocating darkness. The cabin's warm glow barely reached the tree line, leaving the surrounding woods in a velvet blackness where shapes moved and shifted. Amani stood at the edge of the clearing, gripping the small carved stone in his hand. The woman had instructed him to venture farther tonight, to test himself in the heart of the forest. "Remember," she said, her voice steady but commanding, "the shadow watches for hesitation. Fear is natural, but it is your choice whether it controls you. Stay calm, stay aware, and trust your instincts." Amani nodded, though his heart pounded like a drum in his chest. Each step he took was deliberate, his feet barely making a sound on the wet earth. The fireflies flickered faintly, their soft glow illuminating a narrow path. His eyes scanned the darkness, every movement amplified, every whisper of wind significant. And then he felt it. A presence, not the woman, not the forest, but something else entirely. A chill ran through him as the shadow emerged from the trees. Its form was humanoid but warped, fluid, almost like smoke wrapped in darkness. Its eyes, or where eyes should have been, glimmered faintly, intelligent and menacing. Amani froze. His body trembled, but he remembered the woman's words. Fear was a signal, not a prison. He focused on the stone, feeling its warmth steady him. Slowly, he crouched lower, keeping the shadow in his line of sight. The shadow moved closer, silent as the wind, and Amani noticed how it mirrored his movements, anticipating, testing him. Every instinct screamed to run, but he stayed rooted, alert. He realized the shadow was not just an enemy, it was a teacher, a force meant to reveal his weaknesses. Suddenly, the shadow lunged, not with claws or teeth, but with speed and agility that made the earth itself tremble. Amani rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding its strike, heart hammering. The forest around him seemed to hold its breath, the fireflies flickering wildly as if frightened by the intensity of the moment. He scrambled to his feet and remembered the journal's symbols. One of them depicted movement like this: anticipate, redirect, stay grounded. He forced himself to breathe, to observe. The shadow paused, tilting its head, almost curious. Amani took a calculated step forward, then another, keeping low, using the shadows of the trees as cover. The next few minutes were a blur of movement, strategy, and focus. The shadow advanced, testing him, but Amani began to anticipate its strikes, learning its rhythm, reading its intentions through the tiniest signs: the brush of wind, the shift in shadow, the faint sound of disturbed leaves. Finally, he reached the center of the clearing, where the fireflies formed a faint ring of light. He held the stone high, focusing all his energy. The shadow hesitated, as if sensing the determination in him. And then, slowly, it receded into the forest, melting into the darkness but leaving a lingering sense of presence. Amani's knees shook, sweat dripping down his face, but he felt a surge of triumph. He had faced the shadow directly and survived. Not by fleeing, not by hiding, but by observing, understanding, and responding with clarity. The woman emerged from the edge of the trees, her eyes glinting in the moonlight. "You have done well," she said softly. "Tonight you faced what many fear most, themselves in the dark, their own hesitation and doubt. The shadow is not your enemy. It is a reflection, a challenge, a teacher. Remember this lesson. Fear will always be there, but courage is choosing to act despite it." Amani nodded, exhaustion and exhilaration mingling in his chest. The forest was no longer just a place of mystery and danger. It was a crucible, shaping him, testing him, teaching him how to survive, and how to become more than he had ever imagined. As he returned to the cabin, the shadows seemed less threatening, the forest less alien. The fireflies guided his path like silent guardians. He knew the shadow would return, as all challenges did, but now he was no longer a boy running from the dark. He was someone learning to meet it, someone beginning to understand the strength within him. That night, lying on his bed, Amani could not sleep. His mind replayed every movement, every instinct, every lesson. The shadow, the forest, the woman, and the stone, all were pieces of a puzzle he was only beginning to understand. And for the first time, he felt a flicker of certainty. He was no longer invisible, and whatever awaited him in the dark, he was ready to face it. Scene 6, Secrets Revealed. The next morning, the forest was quiet, almost unnaturally so. The usual rustle of leaves and chirping of birds seemed muted, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Amani awoke in the cabin with a sense of anticipation he could not explain. Last night's confrontation with the shadow still throbbed in his chest, leaving him exhausted but strangely exhilarated. The woman was waiting for him at the edge of the clearing, her dark eyes reflecting the pale morning light. "Today," she said softly, "I will tell you part of the truth. You need to know why you are here." Amani's pulse quickened. "Why me? Why did the forest, the shadows, choose me?" She motioned for him to sit on a flat stone near the cabin. Many years ago, this forest was different. It was home to guardians, people who protected its secrets, guided those who needed it, and kept balance between the world of humans and the spirits of the forest. I am one of the last of them, and the forest chooses children who carry a spark, a potential to see and understand what others cannot. Amani's eyes widened. "A spark, me?" "Yes," she said, her voice firm but gentle. "You were not born here, but the forest has recognized something in you. A resilience, an instinct, a willingness to face fear that most lack. That is why the shadow approached you, why the fireflies guided you, and why you survived. You are part of something larger, Amani, something you have yet to understand fully." He swallowed hard, the weight of her words pressing down on him. "And the shadow, it wasn't trying to hurt me." She shook her head. "No, the shadow is a test. It challenges, teaches, and strengthens those who are ready to see beyond the obvious. Every movement, every hesitation, every fear it provokes, it is a mirror of what lies inside you. You have begun to understand yourself, your courage, and your instincts. That is what matters." Amani looked at her, the forest stretching endlessly behind her, the shadows shifting gently in the light. "And you, why are you helping me?" She studied him, her eyes softening. "Because I have seen children like you before, children who arrive scared, alone, invisible to the world. I have guided them and I have watched them grow. But you, Amani, you carry more than fear. You carry potential. And one day you will decide what to do with it." He pressed the small carved stone in his hand, feeling its warmth. A spark of understanding flickered inside him. The forest, the shadow, and the woman, they were all guides, shaping him, preparing him for something beyond his understanding. "You have learned well," she said, standing and brushing dirt from her hands. "But the next steps will challenge you further. Soon, the world beyond this forest will come looking for you. You must be ready for that as well." Amani nodded, a mixture of anticipation and anxiety tightening his chest. He was no longer just a scared boy from the orphanage. He was someone who had faced shadows, survived tests, and glimpsed truths hidden from the ordinary world. And yet, he knew his journey was far from over. The forest whispered around them, the fireflies beginning to emerge again as night approached. Somewhere beyond the trees, the shadow lingered, patient and watchful. And Amani realized that the lessons he had learned so far were only the beginning. Scene 7, the search begins. The forest was unusually quiet that morning, as if it knew something was coming. Amani had spent the night lying on the cabin floor, awake and alert, listening to the distant sounds of birds and the soft whisper of wind through the trees. The woman had instructed him to stay vigilant, to trust his senses, and to remember everything he had learned about observation, patience, and courage. As the sun rose, Amani noticed something different. The air carried faint sounds he hadn't heard before, voices. Distant shouts and the occasional crunch of footsteps. His heart skipped a beat. "They're looking for me," he whispered. The woman nodded solemnly. "Yes, the orphanage knows you are missing. They will come for you. Tonight you may be tested in ways you are not ready for, but do not fear. Use everything you have learned. Trust the forest. Trust yourself." Amani's mind raced. He had survived the shadow, learned to read the forest, and faced tests of courage. But now, the world beyond the trees was intruding into his sanctuary, bringing with it uncertainty and the weight of authority he had always feared. Hours later, he spotted movement at the edge of the forest, a group of people, unfamiliar and determined, moving through the underbrush. He recognized the uniforms of the orphanage staff. They called his name, their voices loud and commanding, echoing through the trees. Panic surged through him, but he gripped the small stone tightly and focused on his breathing. "Remember," the woman whispered, "observe, do not panic, and move silently. The forest will guide you." Amani crouched low and moved between the shadows of the trees. He noticed subtle signs, broken branches, displaced leaves, and faint footprints in the damp earth. Every sound the search party made gave him clues about their location, movement, and numbers. He followed a narrow path, keeping out of sight, the fireflies' faint glow guiding him through the deeper shadows. Suddenly, one of the orphanage staff called out, closer now, their voice sharp with concern. Amani froze, pressing his back against a tree. He remembered the shadow's lessons, patience, awareness, and stillness. He stayed perfectly still, letting the voices pass overhead. The forest seemed to hold him, shielding him with its branches, roots, and darkness. Hours passed. The search party moved systematically, leaving temporary gaps in their coverage. Amani began to move again, silently weaving between trees, recalling every lesson from the woman. Anticipate, observe, adapt. He realized that the forest was alive in a way that could protect him if he paid attention to its signs. By evening, exhaustion weighed on him, but the thrill of survival coursed through his veins. The search party had not yet found him, but they were persistent. The woman appeared silently at his side. "You have done well," she said. "But soon, you will have to decide whether to stay hidden or to return. The choice will define the next stage of your journey." Amani glanced back toward the cabin, then toward the deeper forest. The shadows that had once terrified him now felt like old teachers, guiding him, testing him, shaping him. He understood that the searchers would not stop. They would eventually reach the forest. And when they did, he would need every lesson, every skill, and every ounce of courage to face them. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the forest in deep shades of orange and purple, the distant voices grew louder. Amani knew that the end of this chapter was approaching. The orphanage was closing in, and soon he would be forced to confront both the world he had fled and the truth he had been discovering in the forest. He tightened his grip on the stone and whispered to himself, "I am ready." Scene 8, The Return. The forest was shrouded in twilight as Amani crouched behind a thick cluster of roots. The distant voices of the orphanage staff had grown louder, and the crunch of boots on leaves echoed through the trees. His heart pounded, but he no longer felt the paralyzing fear that had once gripped him. He had survived shadows, tests, and darkness. Now he faced the world outside the forest. The woman appeared silently at his side, her expression calm yet serious. "They are close," she said. "You must decide. Will you stay hidden or will you let them find you?" Amani looked at her, then at the path leading back to the orphanage. He thought of the cabin, the lessons, the shadows, and the fireflies. He thought of the strength he had discovered within himself, the courage, awareness, and clarity he had earned. Slowly, he nodded. "I'll go back," he whispered. The woman placed a hand on his shoulder. "Good. Remember everything you have learned. Fear will always be there, but now you know how to face it." Taking a deep breath, Amani stepped onto the narrow path leading out of the forest. The staff spotted him almost immediately, calling his name, relief and surprise in their voices. He raised his head, walking steadily, each step measured and deliberate. The shadows of the forest clung to him but no longer threatened. When he emerged fully from the trees, the staff surrounded him, their expressions softening as they realized he was unharmed. Amani felt a strange mixture of emotions, relief, sadness, and a quiet pride. He had returned, but he was not the same boy who had slipped out of the orphanage weeks ago. One of the caretakers reached out, gently taking his hand. "Amani, we were so worried." He nodded, letting himself be guided back. I'm okay," he said quietly, feeling the weight of his journey settling into his chest. As they walked back toward the orphanage, he glanced over his shoulder at the forest. The fireflies flickered faintly, as if waving goodbye, and the shadows seemed to bow in silent acknowledgement. The woman had disappeared among the trees, leaving only the memory of her presence and the lessons she had taught. Amani's thoughts were a whirlwind. He realized that courage was not about never being afraid. It was about moving forward despite fear. It was about observing, understanding, and trusting oneself. The forest had tested him, the shadow had challenged him, and now he had returned stronger, more aware, and more alive than ever before. Back at the orphanage, the walls seemed smaller, the corridors familiar yet changed. He walked through them with a newfound sense of confidence. Other children stared curiously, But Amani no longer felt invisible. He had faced the darkness, learned from it, and survived. That night, lying in his bed, he held the carved stone tightly in his hand. He closed his eyes and remembered the woman's words. "You carry potential, Amani. One day, you will decide what to do with it." For the first time in his life, Amani did not feel alone. He had a forest behind him, shadows that had taught him, and a strength within him that no one could take away. He had been tested, challenged, and transformed. And though the world ahead was uncertain, he was ready. The forest whispered beyond the walls of the orphanage, soft and gentle, as if promising that this was not the end, only a beginning. And Amani, finally, understood what it meant to be truly alive.